Welcome to Leader U by Black River Performance Management, where we believe work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it. In this leadership podcast, we will dive into the lived experiences of people flourishing in today's workplace and beyond. Join us to hear real-life examples of experiences from our own lives and from the leaders we know and trust. Hello, and thank you for joining this podcast today. I'm very excited to introduce my guest and great friend, Craig Chatriand. I've had the pleasure of getting to know you for the past couple of years. The reason I asked you on this podcast is because the minute I learned that you were from Butte, I realized that you were probably pretty resilient and
Very accurate,
very
yes.
accurate. And so we've developed a good friendship over the years, and I've really admired a lot of the leadership and things that you do in your work and in your role and as a friend and as a father and all of those kinds of things. So I'm happy to have Craig here today, and I'm excited to hear your story and how resilience has become part of your leadership, and as well as how you see students that are resilient and just experiences that you've had and stories that you know about that could help others to kind of build that skill and competency.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I hope I have something to contribute for resiliency. I have worked with a large number of students who have faced any number of challenges and have some really powerful stories in testament to their resiliency, the work that they've done, the people who've supported them. So I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome. Let's start off with how it all started for Craig. Let's go back to the Butte days.
Sure. I was fortunate to grow up in the greatest city in Montana and probably America, uh, Butte, Montana. It was a great place, fun place for my brothers and I to grow up. Um, we spent as much time as we could outdoors. My older brother and I did a lot with sports, very involved that way. I especially played football. I wasn't very good at any of those sports, but I kept doing it and liked it. And then I decided to go to college because they were going to let me play football. I went to the University of Montana Western in a really small community of Dillon, Montana. And I went to college because they were going to let me play football. I had no intention or inclination to get a degree or to graduate. I was just going to go. And after my first semester, I did pretty well academically. I got some really good feedback from some of my professors, and I thought this might be for me. I might be able to do this. And stopped playing football after 1 year. Got really involved in our residence hall system. I was a resident assistant for a couple of years. I was an undergraduate hall director, so I helped run our residence halls for a couple of years. And that was so much fun. I wanted to make a career of it. So I went to the University of Northern Colorado. I was a hall director there and got my master's degree. And from there, I kept going east and I ended up in Ames, Iowa. And I worked at Iowa State University. I did a number of things there. I worked in the residence halls. I worked in institutional research. I got to do some things with academic support, tutoring, and that area. And I was also fortunate to get my doctorate from Iowa State University. And then it was clearly time to come back to mountains, trout, and elk. So I landed back in Idaho. I worked at the University of Idaho for a number of years, doing a couple different things. I started doing academic success programming in the residence halls there, and then I made a transition to working in the Dean of Students office where I got to do a whole bunch with student conduct, behavioral intervention, threat assessment, working with students with some pretty significant mental health issues. And that really, I've always had threads of that in my career, but that's where I really took that on full time and uh, I still do a lot of that work today. And but after the University of Idaho, I ended up in Spokane, Washington, working at Whitworth University, doing a lot of the same work. And then here to Pocatello and working at Idaho State University as the Assistant Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean of Students. So that's kind of a short bit of where I got professionally and how I got there.
And so now you are taking on a new role, right?
Yep, I just started. It's an interim role. I'm the Interim Vice President for Student Affairs and Enrollment Management. I think I've been doing that for about a month. Um, a lot different skill set, a lot different day-to-day work than I'm used to. It's a lot less of the behavioral management, threat assessment, and a lot more vision leadership, looking broadly over uh, the institution and the student experience.
Yeah, so I'm curious about a lot of the experiences you've had with being in dorms and in living situations and all the threat assessment, all the things that you see that people don't really know. Like, what does a dean of students do, right? Like, and what does that job look like? What is a day to day? What are some of the things that students are facing and that you face in that role?
The best way to describe the day-to-day for a dean of students is there's no regular day. It's rare that the course of my day follows what's on my calendar. It can be a call from a faculty member, it can be a student walking in, it could be a parent phone call. But the issues that our students are facing are varied. And every institution I've worked at, it's been a little bit different. Um, the one thread that is consistent is our students are dealing with a crisis of mental health that is really unprecedented in young people, and especially on college campuses. Anxiety, depression, um, suicidality, those issues have become so prominent that we spend a pretty significant amount of time in resource trying to help support students as they navigate higher education and wrestle with some of those issues.
Mhm.
We also, through the student conduct side, I do a lot with either sexual assault, rape, sexual harassment, all the things that fall under what we describe as the Title IX umbrella. And again, most of those situations are devastating to the people involved. But I've been a sexual assault investigator for a number of years. Um, I still play that role when needed, but for the most part now I'm what's considered a decision maker in that process. And so after we do an investigation, um, we have a hearing, and I essentially oversee or chair that hearing. Feels a little bit like a referee or a very amateur judge, and I get to help weigh evidence, look at evidence, and make a determination with a group of other people in those matters. So every day is a little bit different.
Mhm.
The I think the issues that rise to the top of my priority list are almost always those of mental health, sexual assault, or significant either classroom or university disruption. And most of those issues can be tied back to a number of other things that students are experiencing in their lives as well.
Mhm. So, how was COVID for that?
Okay. COVID was great. Ask anybody. I highly recommend it. Um, I started at Idaho State University, I think 10 days before the university went remote. And so I moved to a new city. I started a new job, mostly from the luxury of my living room, which was incredibly difficult. And if it was hard on me, our students who were still trying to find jobs, find money, find ways to pay for college while trying to learn in a mode that most of them have never experienced. We had students who would bring their laptop and sit in the car in our parking lots to have access to Wi-Fi because they didn't have that in other places. Um, that happened so early in my time at Idaho State University. That really gave me a picture of some of the challenges that our students have, especially um, financial challenges, trying to find resources. It also showed me the dedication that our students have, right? If we have students who are willing to sit in a parking lot for numerous hours a day just so they have access to the internet to complete their homework and their academic studies, that's a dedicated student. I mean,
Mhm.
that this education is going to change the course of that person's life. And so I knew right away this was the place for me in working with this student body. We had challenges that we had never faced through COVID. The early iterations of Zoom and trying to do classes over Zoom. We had plenty of Zoom bombing where we would have people jump into classrooms, harass professors, harass other students, disrupt things. And so that was a new challenge. Some of the other challenges have been, they've always been present, but it was a new mode of experiencing them. A lot more online, a lot more remote. But the feelings of isolation that our students experience, and I think most people across our country and really across the world could say, yeah, I felt lonely, I felt isolated. My day-to-day routine was disrupted. I talked to students who would go a week or more without leaving their apartment, and they said they didn't have much of a reason to, and they didn't have the motivation to. They had what they needed, and they just stayed in their apartment, usually in their bedroom. So the amount of, again, depression, anxiety that came from some of those situations, I think is it's really accelerated. I also think trying to help our students who have had 2 years of pretty non-traditional learning, try to help them reintegrate back into face-to-face classroom, face-to-face interactions. Campus involvement has been and will continue to be a pretty tremendous challenge moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about just moving here. I moved here. You moved here. We met you. I think you were grabbing takeout when you first moved here. We were getting it as well, and that's where we met you. And it's hard enough to move to a new location, not know anybody, start a new job, do all of these things that would, quite frankly, scare a lot of people out of even trying it, right?
Had I known the pandemic was coming, I don't know if I would have made the same decisions.
Right.
No, I was in a place professionally where this was the right move for me, and there were a lot of things I was excited about coming to Pocatello for, and I was excited to find regular live music. I was excited to get involved in the community, and I wasn't able to do any of those things for a very long time, but I still had a good support system, both from some of my friends. Like I said, I've worked in enough places across the country that I've kind of collected some friends for that. But moving to a new community, I found people like you and Rob who were really instrumental in helping connect me to other people, helping me find ways to enjoy Pocatello and its surrounding areas for the things I like to do. Um, Getting outdoors, fishing, those were really important that you all helped connect me to, and it gave me a sense that I wasn't here alone. While still doing all the work and things from home or with a university that was still mostly remote, I still had people that I could ask questions to. Where do I go to get this, or what type of restaurant can get me this, or if I want to go fishing or hiking, where are some of the places I could. So I wasn't alone here. I still, meeting you and Rob so early in my time here, I had people, I had support that I could reach out to, have some any semblance of community that I could have being in a new place. And those were really, looking back, lifelines for
For
me.
sure.
That were, I don't think I would have been near as successful without having that as early as I had it my time here.
Yeah. I think about students and the experience that they have too, and how hard at first, especially during a pandemic or something, to create those connections and lifelines when everything's just in chaos and we're not sure what's going on. And it's hard enough normally to do that process of moving and leaving home and doing that. But I think about the resilience that they've built and things that they've learned that they've overcome. And some of them come from really traumatic backgrounds in the first place. But for some of them, that might have been the most traumatic thing, leaving home and then going through that. That might have been the worst thing that's happened so far. Some of them probably already have a lot of resilience just from their upbringing and realizing that, oh, I can continue to do this because I've done harder stuff than this.
Yeah, and uh, resilience, grit has really been a buzz in education for about the last 10 years. And I think that's good. I think we need to help students develop those skills. But I remember my last institution, I was walking across campus with um, another administrator. we're talking about some issues with resilience and grit, and how do we help our students develop that. And the person I was walking with seemed to be at least a little bit frustrated by the conversation, and not just our conversation, but kind of this whole movement in education. And she said, don't our students already have some of this? Can't we just help them find it within themselves? And that comment really resonated with me. And that particular institution had, at the time, it was around a 40-ish, I think, percent population of students who come from minoritized populations. And I remember thinking, if these students were able to navigate all the different challenges that they experience, that I didn't, as a white, straight Christian guy in the United States, they've already developed an ability to persist, an ability to keep going when things are hard.
Mm-hmm.
And that conversation with that administrator is pretty impactful for me, because that really gave me the idea we can teach some of these skills, but more than anything, we need to help students recognize getting to college is not easy. They did it, and they have skills that they need to tap into. If we can help them look back on a time where they experienced something that was difficult, what skills were useful to you, which
Mm-hmm.
ones weren't, how do you capitalize on the ones that were? I think we can do a whole lot more by helping students realize they've done hard things,
Mm-hmm.
and they can continue to do hard things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know that about my own experience. College was a game changer for me. It changed my family's trajectory and my kids, and I know how impactful that can be. And even though while I was going through a lot of it, I mean, I didn't get my master's till I was like a couple years ago, because I started my family young and all these things. But even while going through that, I realized, I've done harder stuff than this. It might not be what I want to do. Like right now, I don't really want to write a paper, but I've committed to something. And I really had to shift my mindset into, this is something I get to do. And when I made that shift in my mindset, like, nobody's forcing me to do this. This is something I'm doing on my own accord. And some people would be so happy to even have this opportunity. That's when everything shifted for me. And I think when we can share those experiences, obviously we can impose things on people and students and things, but when we can give them their own experience of why it's important, why it matters, how it changed your life, the storytelling, the testimonials really of people whose lives have been transformed, then it becomes, they're more aligned. It's less imposed, it's more aligned, and they're like, yeah, this matters. And also people, I think they're all lonely. It's an actual epidemic right now. And it kills. Brings your death down by 45%, like your life expectancy. It's worse than drinking and smoking, being alone. And so I think people need to know, first off, they're not alone. And every struggle that is going on right now, everybody has had in the course of humanity. Like we've all, but sometimes we get siloed when we're in the moment and we think, why me? Or this only happens to me. But the reality is, it's been happening forever. And what you got to do is find your lifelines. And there's somebody who's going to throw you a lifesaver, or be like, yeah, I'm sorry, it sucks, or listen, or buy you a cup of coffee, or just care about you and see you.
Mhm. As I said, I've worked in residence halls. I lived in residence halls for I think the first 8-ish years of my career. My first two kids came home from the hospital to a residence hall apartment, and it was. I still look back at some of that work I got to do is some of the most fascinating experiences I've had, because you get to watch hundreds of students go through um, almost the same experience, and they all feel like they're doing it alone for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
We know we've done research on college students for 100 years, and we know for a traditional aged student coming right out of high school, their transition looks a lot like a W. Kind of start at a high point which is the honeymoon phase, right? This is great. This is new. This is what I've wanted to do, and I'm excited for it.
I'm out of the house.
Right. I get all my freedom and all of those things. And in that honeymoon stage, at some point, it's going to go down.
Way down.
Yeah. In my experience, that usually happens after the first round of tests and papers. Well, I'm out of the house, but I guess I have to do some work. A lot of our students, it's the first time they got a C. It's the first time that, maybe in my case, it was worse than a C. And you have this idea that we're not in Kansas anymore, Toto. This isn't this. I'm not eating the foods I'm used to eating, and I'm living in a one bedroom place with my roommate, and we can't get away from each other. And my professors are way different than my high school teachers, especially students who come from rural areas where they didn't grow up knowing everybody, around them. And so you have this kind of isolation. And again, we have students going through this at different times in their experience, but they're all doing it about the same time, and they all feel alone doing it. And that's why a lot of the things that we do at a university, um, student activities, the events we have, last year we got to do a couple really neat events at ISU, and the purpose of that is to bring people out, bring them together, give them something else to do besides feeling alone and feeling isolated. So while those events are fun and they're great in the moment experiences, they have a bigger purpose that's really important. And after that low point of isolation, students have oftentimes an initial adjustment. Yeah, this is different, but I can do it. I've done hard things. I can continue to do hard things. And so that, you start at the top, you go down, you go up a little bit, and then eventually there's going to be some more experiences that are going to be difficult. It's homesickness. It's
Breakups.
Yep, that breakup with a significant other, the high school sweetheart who we're going to be together forever. And about October, you realize I'm changing, they're changing, we're doing different things. There's more out there in the world. And then students have a little bit more long-term transition, and there's always ups and downs, but they're less pronounced and less severe. But students go through all of those things. And when I worked in the residence halls, we could just sit and watch it all happen. And we knew, okay, middle of September, we're going to start having these issues. In October, we're going to be dealing with these types of issues. And every year, the pattern is pretty predictable. I am interested to see what those patterns look like coming back from COVID. I got to talk to a student. It was in April, this past April.
I think it's more of a roller coaster.
So, yeah, I think that's exactly right. That moves at high speeds all the time.
Yes.
The student I talked to, though, I've worked in higher education for over 20 years, and so I know the rhythms of an academic semester. And I was talking to one of our student workers and said, I made the comment that, once April hits, I've always had the idea that if students can just really push hard to the end after spring break, we can count down the weeks, 5 weeks. Okay, here's what I have to do in 5 weeks, and start checking the boxes off. Okay, and here's what 4 weeks out. Here's what I have to do. But that marker of spring break has always anchored something for me in higher education for, like I said, over 20 years. And the student said, this semester's felt really weird because this is the first time I've had a traditional spring break. And that comment really struck me. Her first year was the onset of COVID. And so she had I think a 2-week spring break. She never came back to campus. She just stayed online. The next year, we moved spring break to right before finals, and then we had finals be online because we were concerned about students traveling to all sorts of parts of the state and the country and coming back with COVID. And so what has been an anchor for 20 years for me was a brand new experience for her. She was halfway done with her college experience. And that type of disruption, I think, will continue to have some lasting impacts on how we help students, how we support them through their especially their first year of college.
Yeah. So what were some of the lessons that you learned? I guess COVID was a great teacher. And what are some of the things that you've learned through it that you're like, that probably wasn't the best idea. We'll probably do that differently. Or not ruminate on it, but just learn some lessons from it.
One of the first and strongest lessons is always make sure you know when your mic's on mute. We all learned that
Hard.
one way or another. Um,
Good
I,
to know.
I would say the actual biggest lesson is something that I've always known, but it was reinforced in a much more important way. Personal connections are the most important thing we can have.
Mhm.
As a leader, as an administrator, as a faculty member, the personal connections that we have with our students is the number one thing that will keep them engaged, keep them attending, and keep them pursuing their educational goals. I could reach out to 100 different students, but they don't know my name. They, when I send them an email, they think, oh,
It's bad.
who's this
It's
person? Yeah,
something bad.
yeah. When it comes from the dean of students, historically, that's rarely a good thing. But if a student's faculty member reaches out and says, "Hey, I haven't seen you in the Zoom classroom for a week. Is everything okay? How can I be supportive?" Well, maybe everything was okay, and that student was just sleeping in because we record all these things. And I'm just going to watch them later. But
Hmm.
it also tells the students, "I noticed you were gone."
Hmm.
I had a really smart mentor say, a lot of our job in student affairs, and especially in the residence hall world, our job is to notice and to comment. I noticed you haven't been here. Are you doing okay? Just to notice when a student's behavior changes, when something different is going on, when their academic work changes in
Hmm.
quality. That, if they've been doing high quality work and it changes, comment on that. A student doesn't all of a sudden wake up one day and become a less good student. There are other things going on that we probably have a way to assist. And also, if a student has struggled and all of a sudden their academic work improves, comment on it.
Hmm.
There rarely does a person get praise, and that doesn't do something for their identity, for their self-esteem, and the importance
Hmm.
of their engagement in what they have.
Yeah, and it helps them to feel connected. Like people, I'm seen, I'm heard. People notice me. I think one of the things that college does for people is it provides an environment where they can be successful if they don't have one on their own. It's easy to be successful when you have a support network and you have family that helps you and they support you and they lift you up. But when you don't have that, or it doesn't, in your family, they don't even know how that works. It really, it provides, it's like a springboard for um, opportunities and people that are going to come alongside you and believe in you when you don't believe in yourself. Because I can tell you, when I started school, I definitely didn't believe in myself. And I took mentors. It took years, took a lot of years to really retrain my brain. And to the point where now I get to help other people doing that. But I think people think, oh, college, you don't need a degree in this things, but they miss the point. And the point is that it's the experience of doing hard things that you don't want to do, being consistent, creating a network of people that are doing some of the same kinds of things. So it's ultimately a belonging. You're in something and you're working towards a better life for you and your family. And I think that's what the people miss out on. They think of the costs of higher education. They think of all the negative pieces about higher education, but what they don't understand and what they miss, and I don't care what the education is, whether it's CTE, whether it's training, real estate school, any kind of education is going to better your life. But there's something to be said about a community that's that brings you in all of a sudden as a young adult and really doesn't judge you. It really just tries to let you be who you are and figure out in a more of a safe place, like who you are. There's some safety nets. Like
Mhm.
you're a safety net at the school.
Yeah, that's a great descriptor. And we know, especially that traditional age college student coming straight out of high school, they're still forming their identity. They don't know who they are. I haven't seen the latest number, but students change their major something like 6 or 7 times through the course of um, their 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 college tenure. Uh, and we know developmentally, all of that is appropriate. When I was a senior in high school, I tried on the identity of cowboy. Bought a pair of cowboy boots. Had a really nice cowboy hat. It was fantastic. I looked great in it. Don't find those pictures. I had the identity of athlete. Um, Once I got to college, I kept trying on some of those identities. Right, a football player, leader in the residence halls. Um, I was a history and English major, so poet. Also, don't go back and read those things. But that's part of that exploring, right? That's part of seeing a, a bigger world. It's what you're talking about. It's being a part of that community that lets you explore. I was challenged by ideas that growing up in Butte, I didn't know other people had these ideas. I didn't know those ideas were even out there, and it forced me to think about them. I didn't have to accept them, but it forced me to think, why do I believe what I believe? And that question alone is worth everything about college. Why do I believe what I believe? Whether it's about religion or spirituality, whether it's about politics, whether it's about the food you eat, why do I believe what I believe? Where do those beliefs come from, and what do they mean for me going forward? That part of a college education alone is, I think, absolutely invaluable.
I think so too. It's a game changer. Where did this belief come from? Where do I get it? Do I want to keep it or not? And when I came to the realization that a belief wasn't a truth, I was like, because I believe it, you mean it's not true? Like, because I believe something doesn't mean that that's truth. It's a belief. But I think when you don't think outside of that realm, you don't really, it's the way it is. This is the way we do things. This is how it's done. This is the beliefs. And then we kind of fall in line with this is the beliefs. But when we challenge that and constantly change our beliefs, that's when we're growing. And I think that's when we're becoming more resilient. I think we all thought the world was going to be a lot easier on us than it actually was. I had a belief that I would grow up, marry my Prince Charming, and I think the world set me up. It was a joke. Like, it was punked.
There's there's a developmental stage, and you might remember thinking about this as a kid, where you think, I think it was the Truman Show,
Hmm.
where the whole world is set up and designed as kind of one big plot line with you in the middle, and they haven't let you in on the joke. That's a normal part of the psychological
Hmm.
development. And I remember thinking about that as a kid. And once in a while, I still stop and say, is all this real? Is the whole world like scheming to just watch me deal with this, particular type of thing? I think getting out of, for me, it was those identities that I was trying on, reading new things, being challenged by new ideas, being forced to move away from home. And I will remember my first year of college when I got strep throat, and I had no idea what to do. No clue. I didn't know how to make a doctor's appointment. I didn't know how to check if I had I had no. I just laid in my dorm room for a couple of days, really sick. All of those things teach us something. They show us a bigger world,
Hmm.
and that's really, I think, like I said, it's an invaluable part of not just what you learn from a book or from a lecture. It's all those out of class things that really make a college degree, a certificate, any, that post high school education so invaluable.
I agree. It was a game changer for me, and it's changed my family's life. And I had a daughter that's my youngest, just graduated from ISU, and to see the transformation that she had in 4 years, well, 4.5 years, is so inspiring. And um, when she went there, I mean, it was rough, and it was rough on her, and she had so much growing. But she did get involved with some of the student things, and she just started to find a community, and she really started to thrive, and her confidence has went up. She's believing in herself more. Like, it's just great to see. I don't even know what would have happened to her if she would have just. I don't think she would have had the actual capacity to work hard and learn what she needed to learn on her own. I think some people are, and entrepreneurship is great for some, but for most it doesn't work if they don't have some kind of skill set to, like, everything, every job you do, every experience that you have builds on your resilience, builds on your skill set, brings your capacity up. So to think that we're all just going to run out and be a success entrepreneur is, it's not for everybody. And when I watch her, I'm like, no, she's getting the tools she needs. Eventually, she may decide that's what she wants to do, but right now she's building the skills.
Yeah, she built skills in a structured environment with some support that is higher in support at the beginning, and she is presented with greater challenge and given the appropriate levels of support through that challenge. But to have somebody graduate high school and then just put them out into a professional world where the stakes are high without any support is incredibly challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just said, I was 18, sick in my dorm room, and I didn't even know how to make a doctor's appointment.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way I would have been able to go out in an unstructured environment and be successful.
Thrive. Yeah.
Yeah.
You might flounder, you wouldn't flourish, for sure. And some people are different. There's no one size fits all approach. But what I do know is from my own experience and my own kids' experience is that they went in one person, they came out a little different, a lot different, and that's so awesome because they're figuring out who they are, and without their mom hovering over them and just like just letting them be who they become.
When I was in one of my stints in graduate school, Dr. Jody Donovan, she worked at Colorado State University at the time. We talked to parents about their students' beliefs and values being elastic like a rubber band. You're not going to have your student come to college and they're going to sever all of those beliefs. And it could be a number of things. Religion and politics were always the ones that parents were concerned about.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but but what Dr. Donovan would explain to parents is it's like a rubber band. It's elastic. The ideas, the core beliefs, they're still inside your student, but as they get new information, as they see the world different, those are gonna expand. And a lot of times it's gonna come back, but it's gonna come back a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
And it's gonna come back differently that fits your student in their world in this time.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always really appreciated that because I've watched students do that. I've seen them have conflict with their families over some of those challenges.
Mm-hmm.
But learning changes a person. And when I talk to students at new student orientation, one of the things that I try to emphasize is that you are coming in one person, and when you walk across the stage of graduation, you are going to be a different person.
Mm-hmm.
You can't take all of the knowledge that you are about to get over the next several years and see the world the same way. When you are being exposed to so many new, different things, you are going to come out a little bit different, and you're going to see the world with bigger possibilities. And I think it's one of the beautiful things about education to me that I love so much.
Yeah, I think it's a short-term resilience plan, if you really think about it, because resilience is built over a lot of time. But it's a little resilience plan where they start to learn how to navigate the world when they have this problem. They go here, they do this, so they're in kind of a safer space for to build resilience. But as I think about, like, resilience is one of those things too. Somebody who loses a child is never the same person again.
Mhm.
Somebody who's betrayed is never the same person again. Somebody who, um, you know, loses a best friend, any kind of loss like that, any kind of heartache, really difficult times, those things change you. And I don't think resilience is something you bounce back from. I think maybe learning is, but resilience is more you're changed from that point on. You're actually now you see a different lens. You view the world a little bit differently from that experience, good or bad, and we can change, that can change over time. But one of the things I really think is that as we move through this whole experience, every single one is just like layers and layers and layers of resilience. But college is the one thing that I feel like helps give an avenue for people to play around and become more resilient.
It's a safe place to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the last university I worked at was a private school. We required students to live on campus for 2 years. And I remember talking to parents who were very nervous about having their student move from um, Seattle to Spokane or Idaho or anywhere across the country. And one of the things we used to say is here's the staffing structure we have in our residence halls. Here's how the professors are going to get to know them. What we want is for your student to have a safe place to make mistakes because they're going to. But here they have a support network that can come around them, help them learn from those, help them process those in a healthy way to continue moving forward. And I've always loved that kind of notion about college. This is a fairly safe place to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Some mistakes are have a
Mm-hmm.
bigger impact, but failing on an exam is a lot different than some of those things you just talked
Losing a
about.
business or, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's still impactful, but you get to learn in a much safer, lower stakes way the skills that you'll be able to apply a little bit later on.
Yeah. It's it's just so exciting. I love talking about resilience because I just think it's a skill that maybe we didn't know we had when we were younger. I didn't know I didn't call it resilience. But I'm curious if now that's a conversation on the campus, or do they know they're building resilience? Like, or is that the common language?
I think there's some universities that have adopted it as a common language, and they've tried to be intentional about really designing some learning experiences around resilience or grit. Um, I think that's gone away a little bit, and especially the last several years of COVID, it was more about keeping your head above water, which in some ways would have been the perfect way to talk about resilience and persistence. I don't think it's near as much of a conversation as it was.
Mhm.
It felt a little, to me, it felt a little faddish, and it
Mhm.
doesn't mean it's not important or we shouldn't continue with it, but um, it isn't as prominent. I'm not reading about it in academic journals. I'm not reading about it in our trade publications the way I was probably 4 to 7 years ago.
Mhm.
But I think it's always, like you said, it's always been there. Even if we're not intentionally teaching about it,
Mhm.
we're helping to
Cultivate it or something.
yeah.
Yeah.
I got to do uh, one of the most interesting research projects I've been involved in. After I left the University of Montana Western, they changed their entire curriculum structure. When I was attending, you took, you know, 15, 16 credits from August until December. And they changed their structure. So now students take one class at a time. You take one class for 18 instruction days. You get a couple days off, you start your next class. And they were talking about that when I was a student there. I was adamantly opposed to it. I thought it was going to be the ruin of the university because I thought I knew everything as a senior in college. So through my doctoral work, I got to go back and do some research, and I interviewed 27 different students, and all of them told me almost the same story. The worst day is the first day. You get your syllabus, and you see everything that you have to do in the next 3.5 weeks, and it was overwhelming. And you, the number of students who told me I knew I couldn't do this, I knew this was too much for me. And then they would say the best day was the last day. Not only because you finished the course, but because in of those 27 students, I think 23 of them told me you just realized you did something you didn't think you were capable of doing. And I've really adopted that as my definition for part of what a meaningful education is. To be challenged to do something you don't think you can do and to be supported to accomplish that. And I think I walked away from talking to those students in awe. And it didn't matter what discipline they were in. I talked to an environmental science major. I think I did these interviews in February, and this student had been to uh, Yellowstone National Park 4 times that semester for different classes doing in the field research. I talked to another student who was an industrial arts major, and he told me for his woodshop class, he had to build, I think, 8 different um, pieces of furniture. He hadn't built 8 pieces of furniture in his entire life.
Mm-hmm.
But what the pride he felt in those and what he was able to accomplish, he said, I never thought I'd be able to do this ever in my life. And I did it 3.5 weeks. I think the way that built the ability to see through a challenge, and those students would also say, we don't drop classes anymore because I can do anything for 18 days.
Right.
And they were taking some of those notions to say, well, I was going to come and do a year of college and I was going to see how it goes, and then I was probably going to go back home. But now I realize this is just a short amount of time, and if I'm dedicated to this, I can achieve this. I can do this. And I thought some of those stories were so wonderful in terms of what they were accomplishing.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we forget too is just that how easy it is to actually get an education here in Idaho, and how affordable it is. Like that's like there's scholarships for kids that are first time generation, things like that. Like we always, the roadblock is money, but really you can find money and you can find a way.
Well, and we have some of the most affordable tuition nationwide.
Yeah, for sure.
It is cheaper for many out-of-state students to come to Idaho and pay out-of-state rates than it is for them to pay in-state rates in their home state. Mm-hmm. I think some of it is asking the question, what are you willing to temporarily sacrifice to have a better long-term outcome? Even as you were talking about getting your master's degree, mm-hmm. and you didn't always want to write that paper. When I talked to those students, I said, well, why are you here? What do you want out of this experience? Why did you want a master's degree? Mm-hmm. And help them identify that part of it, and then say, okay, what are you willing to give up to get that? Mm-hmm. Are you willing to give up maybe 4 to 5 years of full-time salary that it's going to seem like a lot right now, but when you're still making close to that in 10 years, it's not going to seem as much. Well, getting a college degree, we know getting a college degree has tons of economic benefits, but there's a whole other list of benefits that we never talk about because it always comes down to the economic ones, which are, I don't want to undervalue those. Mm-hmm. Those are important to people. But people with some type of post-secondary education, certificate, degree, bachelor's degree, they report being happier, they report being healthier, they have better interpersonal relationships, are more involved in their community, and we know that those benefits trickle down at least 2 generations in their family. If you're the first to go to college, those benefits of the economic ones, but all of the other ones I just listed, they will show up in the lives of your children and your grandchildren. Mm-hmm. And we don't talk about the way that education has a generational impact. If we can have a short-term sacrifice to have that longer-term benefit. And again, I need to say, for somebody like me, white, straight, Christian, had a lot of family support. It's pretty easy to sit here and say that. I know plenty of students who struggle to work all the hours they can. They squeeze in their homework. We have post-traditional learners who have families and they have kids and they have to work. But it remains true now. There's no better way to move yourself ahead in our country than a college degree. It's the one variable that has been consistent in helping people move ahead and change the conditions of their life the fastest.
Absolutely. It's been such a pleasure having you here today. I know that your time is your most precious resource, and I love spending time with you, and I'm just so grateful that you were here to share your thoughts on resilience and just your own experiences. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I could talk about education and the college experience on and on and on, so I appreciate the opportunity today.
Thank you.